Welcome back to the Peak Property Performance Podcast. I'm your co-host, Drew Hull. I'm here with Bill Douglas today. And before Bill steps in here, let's talk about today's theme, the hidden asset that every building owner should own. And you can.
And
But
you
before we
do,
get and
maybe.
you might. Yeah, exactly. Most might. Exactly. Every building owner can. So before we get started, I just want to remind our listeners to like, share, subscribe. I like the way that one podcaster puts it that I follow. He says, follow me everywhere except in real life. I like that. But this is how we're spreading the word on the peak property performance movement and changing an industry. And if you think that you'd provide value as a guest here, we welcome CRE thought leaders from all stages of ownership, operation. I mean, even, maybe like corporate tenancy or something like that. We enjoy these kinds of stories. It's all about stories ultimately and wins because there's so many of them out there and we really enjoy those conversations and they work well on the podcast. So yeah, please reach out to us via peakpropertyperformance.com is a great way to do it, or you can obviously find us on LinkedIn as well. So Bill Douglas, welcome.
Hey, it's always a pleasure to be here. And along that same line, Drew, I was interviewing somebody for the podcast to be a future guest this morning. And I basically said it's a platform where we share wins and losses and wants and strategy about data and digital. We're not selling anything. This is meant to be a platform to elevate the industry. So
I love it. I love
anybody
it.
that wants to share stories to hop on the show with us.
Yeah. Personally, as someone who doesn't like salesy things in life, period, I like it. I enjoy the conversations and the
This
more
is an
real world.
experience share podcast. So come share your experiences and help others in the industry. That's my point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
I totally agree. All right. Well, yeah, I mean, kind of going back to the idea of this theme for today, like we teased it at the top here. What is that hidden asset that every building owner should own and can own, every single building owner? And of course, anybody who's heard maybe one episode of us before knows what we're talking about. It is that digital infrastructure. So today we're going to decode a little bit about that because I mean, I was literally this week, I was talking with someone who I've known a long time who was very good in sales actually and in technical sales. And they admitted that they weren't totally grasping this idea of digital infrastructure. I'm like, sweet. Okay, let's step back for a second. And I know something you do grasp is a physical infrastructure, right? Yes. I mean, everybody who's been on site practically anywhere can grasp a physical infrastructure. So I feel like that's a good place to kind of start and then shift like, whoa, interesting. Okay. Physical infrastructure, it's easy. We could, all of us who are talking and listening or watching this podcast along the way could hop on a plane and go to a building and walk into a closet and point to cables and point to hardware and point to racks and point to lights that are flashing and say, hey,
Well,
something's doing something.
Well, let's hop off for a second. That is part of the digital infrastructure, those lights and those cables.
It's
That's the
true.
tangible part, right? Those
It's
that's the
true.
network, the devices, the things that you can touch. But what about all the other things included that you can't touch?
No, that's what I'm saying is I feel like for people like this guy I was talking to who are having a hard time grasping digital, I feel like it helps to start with the physical because the physical leads to the digital. You couldn't have a digital infrastructure if you didn't also have a physical. But I always say that the physical is a means to an end. It's important. It's an important means, but you have to do it. You have to have that physical infrastructure in order to get the connectivity so that you can operate this holistic thing that we constantly talk to as the digital infrastructure. So that's why I think that works well if someone needs it to kind of pull back and just think in terms of bolts, physical. You can touch it. You can
Well,
touch the corner.
I like
Touch
to
the,
say you being a commercial real estate owner or operator, you're used to sticks and bricks and glass and, facades and signs and landscaping and carpet and, open space and pools and amenities and things like that. Those are assets that you invested in, countertops, dishwashers, if you're a multifamily invested in. I think the industry has traditionally thought about technology and digital as an expense, like it's a pain in the neck. It's something I have to do only because tenants make me do it. I have to do it, yada, 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 instead of thinking about it as an investment that should generate a return. So, digital infrastructure is a broad category, but it's largely ignored.
well, and it's good too because like the pieces of furniture and things like that, they don't rely on anything. You could stick you could stick a rug or a couch anywhere in a campus, and it's going to work because somebody put a little design behind it. That's great, but it operates as an independent thing. It achieves a purpose. Somebody would say, oh, we wanted to make it look welcoming or feel a certain way. It's a vibe, whatever. So it's more, I mean, truly tangible, obviously, but it's more, I feel like a direct impact than boring old physical infrastructure that connects things, but it leads to this way more important thing that it's you want to right size that thing, that digital infrastructure thing, and it's going to bring back lots and lots of value that we constantly talk about here. So there is a level of I mean, it is, I guess, ultimately a level of abstraction a bit with the digital infrastructure, but it doesn't have to be. It's not really that abstract.
Digital infrastructure for listeners that haven't heard us explain it, and I'm sorry for the ones that have. Right, it's the systems, it's the physical systems, the racks, the devices, it's the sensors that are out there, those cameras, the I don't know, the lighting sensors, the thermostats, for instance. That's all part of your digital infrastructure, access controls, blank controls, whatever system you have to control, elevator controls, air controls, et cetera, et cetera. The sensors, and then just equally as important is the data that those produce.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's super powerful. And to give you had an example with a salesperson, like, well, we had a listener of the show 2 weeks ago sent in a form and said, I'd like to do a digital review with you. So we did one and he came prepared and said, we have a converged network in the building. We have a really awesome digital infrastructure. And I said, I am excited to see this. Like, show it to me. Like, I didn't question it at all. I was like, super. I love it when we say to somebody, we have no value to present. So I thought it was going to be one of those calls. The network he sent us, and you've seen it, was the Wi-Fi network. And that was it. Right. And I said, well, who owns it? He goes, well, we do. And I said, well, this blank ISP on the bottom left corner, it's their drawing. So can you go pull that contract up real quick and see who owns it? And within 5 minutes, he came back and he said, wow, they gave us the cable. We installed it. We installed all the sensors. They own it. We can't touch it. We can't use it. And it's theirs for life until they abandon it. Okay. So you said you had a converged network. Let's talk about where your access controls are, where your lighting controls. And I went down all that list and he said, oh, we have all those. I just don't know where they are and how they connect. And at the end of an hour, he said, this was brutally painful. I'm sorry I wasted your time. I said, you didn't waste our time. We are here to educate people. And the converged digital infrastructure is still possible. Even if you have to leave that one alone, you can still build it for all the other systems. And he said, okay, well, let me go figure out where those are and where the network maps are and where the data is, and we'll come back to you. And then I want to do that. So they're going to figure out what to do with the one that they don't own, and then the ones that they do, and figure out where the data is. So it was a great experience. And it's not even a customer, but they are so much better off just from having the conversation. So put it in context that's what digital infrastructure is. Like, you may be able to touch it, you may be able to see it, but a lot of times you can't.
It's funny. It's drawing to my mind. My 16-year-old son is super excited about his truck because it's loud, rumbly, and powerful, and he thinks it's amazing. And here's why I feel like this is a similar thing, because to his 16-year-old mind, he's arrived, this truck is not new. It's over a decade old. But in my mind, I'm trying to tell him, like, listen, the more you can drive it like your grandmother, the longer this is going to last you and the less you're going to have to spend on it. To be fair, I probably thought like he did when I was 16 also. But I feel like there's a similarity there in understanding holistically, like the system, the way that it works when you drive your truck, for instance. Yeah, it's fun to have it rumble and rev and 4,500 RPM sounds amazing with this extra muffler, blah, blah. But in reality, when you look at the larger system, you're realizing if you can take this in, you're realizing that you're putting more stress and strain on physical components that are going to wear down and cost you more money. So I feel like it ties in with what we're talking about with digital infrastructure, where it's like, if we were to grab people again, fly into a facility and we badge in and we step inside the lobby and we just think for a moment, we're like, how did we just badge in? How did that work? Why did that work? Did that talk? Oh, that talk to a system. Is that system connected? Where is that system connected? Is it connected to network A or network 7, network J? Understanding all of those intricacies, it's important. You got to get down to the intricacies ultimately in order to, rifle through it and make sure that you're not paying for things you don't need. Redundancies are only there if you designed them specifically to be in there. Sometimes they're good, oftentimes they're not. So it's funny because that's where my mind went to. I feel like there's some similarities there to instead of just kind of being like, bam, I'm going to solve this thing right now. My truck needs to rumble versus like, it's okay. My truck can rumble, but I also want to think about it in terms of the longer term. I'm only going to rev it to 3,500 because I think I want this thing to last a few years longer, or, you know what I'm saying? Like maintaining it, taking care of it, understanding more holistically the system that we're talking about.
Well, along the same analogy of the sons with trucks and cars, because I have two sons older than yours, but as soon as they realized that they were going to have to pay for their tires and do the brake jobs themselves, the driving changed. So that's the same analogy for doing a digital infrastructure review. This gentleman did one and all of a sudden realized, oh, wait a second, I don't understand, or I don't know what I don't know. And then he came back about a week later and said, I'm sorry that we gave away that piece of our digital infrastructure to this ISP. Now let's come up with a strategy to get control of everything else and figure out when and if we want to change this one network. Maybe we don't, maybe we do. That's a whole separate conversation. In the weeds, change the brakes himself, and all of a sudden he realized, okay, this is not terrible. This is something we can fix over time with a strategy versus just ignoring it. Don't give away what is yours. And I
Absolutely. Yeah.
specifically speaking about data and the networks, like how many times are you paying for networks? How many times are you paying for redundant systems? Where is your data? Are you using your data? So lather, rinse, repeat. We talk about that a lot on the show, but I just wanted to share some of these experiences because we've had these conversations since the last time we did just two of us episode. So
Yeah. Well, and I think, like in this idea of why do owners do this? Why don't they recognize the digital infrastructure as an asset? Some of this I feel like I've said before, but there's definitely a component of time, 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 time. There's so many things that happen in the process of getting a building. Let's just say it's a greenfield. There's so many things that happen in that construction process. And obviously if some provider comes your way and says, "Hey, we're going to pay for this cable plant," you don't even have to pay for it. That feels awesome. Like, my gosh, this is a few $100,000 worth of a cable plant, right? How could this be a bad idea? But that's where I'm saying is that's a piece of a system.
you just gave it
Amazing.
away.
That's right.
And to replace it, this gentleman has 7 other networks in his building, and the cost for that was much more than the number you just threw out.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Drew, just yesterday, I don't even think I told you about this. I was interviewed by GIST, the Government Institute for Science and Technology, and they are through ASU, using their graduate program there, interviewing people in the commercial real estate space to see why technology is so slowly adopted, particularly in the built environment, but not, and they're doing built environment and doing property management. I advised him that maybe there's a gap in the middle, but those 2. So we talked specifically about how did this happen or how does this happen? And he had already interviewed 35 other people, and he didn't share with me the results until I shared my opinion. So I'm not going to share my opinion. I'll share my results, his results, excuse me, from the 35. And that is just architects are used to doing it a certain way. Contractors are used to doing it a certain way. And none of that concluded technology because before technology was just internet. Even before that, before internet, there was no technology. There was buildings, clean, cool air, hot and cold water, get them out of the building, and that was it. There was really no technology. The thermostats were manual, and then over time, technology became internet, and now it's smart thermostats, it's cameras, it's access controls, it's parking, it's lighting, it's EV charging, it's tenant Wi-Fi. It's connectivity wired and Wi-Fi and cellular for all your systems. The people that are doing the design and the design, like architects do a legitimate design. The building engineer designs it not to fall down and how to make it, right? And then the contractor has to go build it. The digital infrastructure was never architected. Like the physical infrastructure, why don't you architect the digital? Right? And then they hand it down. And then the 90 days from going live, this is what GIST is telling me, and I know it to be true, but it's their words. So it was validating. 90 days from going live, the property manager shows up and they're like, well, we need this system and we need those sensors and we need oh, by the way, this code needs an elevator. I mean, an emergency phone by the pool, right? And the elevator needs a line to work and it has to be to this code. And, fire systems are taken care of, but that's it. The rest of the digital bag. And then that building is forever hurting and lagging. Building is sold and the buyer never bothered to figure out what was there digitally. They hired an engineer to go inspect it, to physically inspect it. Is this going to fall down? Does this have water leaks? Is there foundation issues, et cetera, et cetera? Do I need to fix that crack in the parking deck? Is it structural? But they never do that with digital. That's the asset we're talking about. That's the hidden asset that's so incredibly valuable, but so often ignored.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and there's multiple ways, obviously, that it can go wrong. Like, again, thinking about it as a system, I think is the right way to do it. Yes, you have to then subsequently break it down and say, what are all the components of the system? And it can get boring to some. It can get like eye glaze over. Your eyes might glaze over kind of thing, but it's critically important. It's critically important. I'm also thinking about kind of the another angle here is like who who is it, which team is it, which vendor is it that you have that's designing where you place things in the building, like your quote unquote data closets. Where are they? How many are there? We talk about this a little bit in the book, I think. I think in this category maybe, but the notion of what are the motivations behind the team or the person or whatever that's conducting that. because right, as well as I do, that sometimes you can see those motivations based on, oh, the thing we put together, here's the cost of that thing. Like, whoa, that's not the right size. That's a big ticket, but it's not the right size. It's not designed properly. And of course, that is all physical infrastructure that ultimately your digital infrastructure will rely upon. So it's a building block thing. If it's janky, if it's off at the base, it's going to be off as you continue to build onto it, as you continue to snap digital infrastructure in and add digital infrastructure, moves, adds, changes of digital infrastructure on top of that physical. Though you got to have a good foundation, like so many other things in life, or it doesn't work well.
Another analogy that came out, I was on Kevin Chokat's podcast, Friday Capital, and he said, because he raises capital for developers in the
Yeah.
multifamily space. So he knows the build side. He goes, these dudes would never put in 4 or 5 or 6 different plumbing systems. They would never put in multiple electrical systems, but I see all the time that they have multiple networks. Why is that? So we went round to the root cause, and it's not intentional. It's because nobody owns it. It's being ignored in the middle, and it's grossly expensive, not just to build, but to maintain. So you wouldn't have multiple delivery systems for your utilities. This is another utility, right? It's the 4th or 5th utility, call it what you want. How come you don't design it and manage it like that? I mean, it's a tremendous asset. It will drastically reduce your OpEx. You can significantly reduce your CapEx if you're building. If you're just trading the building, we strongly encourage you to make digital review part of your due diligence prior to buying a property. Know what you need to know. Do it before you buy it. You can factor the price to fix anything into the transaction, so you're not eating it afterwards. Your property manager is going to love you for it.
I think that's a great comparison again. I mean, like fifth utility sounds great, makes sense. But I think even more detailed support of this idea of it being a fifth utility is exactly what you were just saying. Like, if you add a few hundred or 1,000 square feet to an existing structure, let's take power. What you got? You have enough power to snap in another circuit onto the main board? Cool. A few 20, 30 more amps? Nice. You snapped it onto the main. So you connected back to the main. Let's take plumbing. Oh, you need a sink, you need a drain, you need a whatever for the plumbing. Did you install a new system? No, you didn't. You tied it back to the main. So it's the exact same thing. On the digital side, you tie it back to the main. Oh, you have a new system, whatever it is, door access, whatever it is, thermostats. You tie it back to the main. You don't bring in a brand new system. So
About that client in Charlotte, large apartment complex, they decided to do smart thermostats, and they were elated because the thermostat vendor and door locks and thermostats was selling them quoted hubs and repeaters, and they didn't need them. Just send us that. We'll make sure it works on your system in our lab. They didn't need it. So not only did they rip the cost out, they ripped interrupting all of the tenants to put in these hubs and repeaters. And then they just walked down the hall and plugged them in as they needed. That was just simple, easy peasy, one digital infrastructure in the building. It worked. So that saved them about $150,000 just on hubs and repeaters for, I forget the square foot of the building, but it's 300 units. So that is just one easy example. Like why like you reduce your duplicate infrastructure. Like,
yeah, definitely. Absolutely. We just had it happen. In fact, we're recording this on a Friday, so I don't know if this will happen today, but a corporate tenant is kind of right sizing and correcting some things that have been in place for a few years that came up in an audit where it's exactly like it's very similar to what you just laid out there, Bill. But in this case, it's elevators and which voice services are being leveraged. And there's some extraneous things, to say the least, that are involved here. And here's what we enjoy. We enjoy learning about these details. Like, oh wow, that sounds interesting that's in there. What you see a logo that's painted on a piece of hardware that says what, and you pay what? How long is that? You know what I'm saying? Like they're kind of discovering this stuff oftentimes, and so you're helping them extract this and say, well, it's already in the building. Oh, we're overpaying. Yeah. Yeah. So, and this was something
what
as
contracts
mundane
apply
as
to it, all of that. Like we push building automation and autonomy here. Like we try not to make this an AI platform, but everybody in commercial real estate, the buzz is AI all over the world, not just in commercial real estate. But we push AI readiness because we're not going to tell you what to do with AI. And even if you're not doing it right now, in 3 years you're going to be, or 2 years or 3 months or 5, whatever. It's not going to be an infinite amount of time before you are AI based. You can't build intelligence on infrastructure you don't control. To go back to that example, if you wanted data from that network that you thought was converged and you owned and you found out you didn't, it is useless in your AI strategy. Without a digital infrastructure, you can't really leverage between the systems that are operating on your property. Is each vendor selling you AI tools? Of course they are, and they're legitimate and they're doing it right. You know, your PMS is doing it, your lighting controls are doing it, blank controls is doing it. They're all doing it. Parking controls down the line. You can't look between them. If you wanted to replace that vendor, you might be held hostage. The building, I don't mean building as in your physical building, but for you to go derive intelligence on your property, you need to have the digital infrastructure strategy in place. Includes data, but the data is worth, we get asked this all the time, Drew. What's this data worth when I have it? Like, it's so much more than we even know right now. I can give you a litany of examples of what it's worth right now, but that's a fraction of what it is actually worth.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think, not that this is the most important thing, but I think one thing that owners have got to keep in mind here is that when you think about the whole system holistically and you need to make some type of tech connectivity decision in order to support your systems, let's say your individual systems, it's critically important because number one, you want to drive out costs. And number two, you want to crank up that revenue. And both of those things happen when you consider your holistic system. Let's just say it's all about the campus as a one big system. So you have to be able to know the independent components of those systems, individual systems, but you also need to be most critically important thinking about it holistically. And yeah, I mean, that's where the power is at. You can't just you can't skip these steps.
We get asked a lot about, especially from owners, how do we evaluate our digital asset or assets? You know, and of course it's in the book, but I don't want to sound like we're selling the book. We call it the DDI review, data and digital infrastructure review. We give it away in the book, right? But we'd be happy to tell you some questions that we almost repeat daily, right? Who owns the networks in your building? The usual reaction is we do. I was like, go check because we have yet to find a commercial real estate building that is multi-tenant, that they actually own every network in the building. We own every network in the building. We have not found one yet. If you have that, come on and tell us about it, please. Because we would love, because you are definitely a leader in the industry. We would love to have you on the show. When you figure out the network, who owns the devices on the end of it? And then when you figure that out, not just where they are, but is there a map to show it? What about the data that all these things are producing? Like, are the systems connected to a repository where you get the data, or is it just siloed? Or are they just not connected? We've even seen analog systems, CCTV, and there is no data. It's all video, and you're paying a ridiculous monthly fee that you don't need anymore. Are there duplicate networks? What contracts are around all these? Like you brought up earlier, how long have I been paying for this? Why am I paying for the phone example, for instance? You say it's only $300 a month. Yeah, but it was $300 a month for 5 years. That's a lot. Do that 4, 5, 6 times. Like, what about the lighting system we found when they turned it on? They said $70,000 the next year. Like almost 70. And can this support future technologies? Because you need to know that. It's part of your CapEx upgrade plan if it can't. Or maybe you don't want it to. It doesn't have to, but know what you don't know. Ask those questions and you can do a digital review yourself. We're not here to sell that. We're here to ask the question of you. Do you know what your digital infrastructure is? Do you know where your data is? And are you interested in using it to make the property operate better? That's the conversation we love to have. I'm sorry I got on my soapbox. I get passionate about this.
No, that's good. That's good. Just some points along the way there, on the duplicate networks thing. I mentioned a little bit ago that redundant can have a positive or negative meaning. That's a perfect example of knowing that what you are doing is because it is the right thing to do. Like having redundant ISPs is probably the right thing to do. Maybe two ISPs is the right sweet spot. One is probably not. Right, we've seen properties struggle with that where, "Oh, man, shoot, this is usually a really great ISP," and then something happens. Maybe it's administrative.
But you don't mean ISPs all the way out to the tenant spaces. You mean ISPs in the core of the building.
Well, both. What I'm saying to the core of the building, yes, which then extends through the digital infrastructure to all tenant spaces everywhere, through across the entire
I would
campus.
think, yeah, I agree
Mhm.
with that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that's a valuable way to do it because this whole process is so physical. I think it just helps to stay as much as possible, stay in the physical world and imagine what you see with your eyes and what you know to be true. And then don't just assume that everything is here because it should be here. Right? Everything that's hanging on backer board in one of your data closets, for instance, it should be there because it belongs there and it's doing a job that ultimately is giving you data that's allowing you to make decisions, not just about that individual system, but about your entire building.
Well, the status quo is easy, but every commercial real estate owner out there has succeeded because they did not shy away from something that wasn't easy. It could be the zoning board change. It could be the loan. It could be the the limited partners. It could be the construction contractor, I don't know, the title agency that when you bought the property, et cetera, et cetera. It's not easy. This is one other thing that it's not terribly hard as far as difficult. It's tedious. It's not easy until it's done, and then it's easy. Like when you could point anything you want to do back to one digital strategy and digital infrastructure, your property manager is going to love you, your tenants are going to love you, and your partners are going to love you because you're going to make more money. So we encourage people to include digital just like you would, the sticks and the bricks. Everything else we talked about earlier. You walk in and you can see that beautiful conference room or the common areas or the pool or the dog park or whatever is attached to this building to make it really unique. I think goal should be just as much part of that. I know we'll buy it, but my sons rent places and I see which ones are good and which ones aren't, and makes a big difference to the tenant too.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, truly believe that it is a utility. This connected infrastructure thing is a utility because it really does affect not just how you think about the whole system, but also like the decisions that you make because of it.
In closing, if you're building a property, design it strategically early. The ROI is massive. If you're buying a property, make it part of your due diligence. And if you already own a property and you're going to hold it, do a review. Ask your team to do their own review. Try to find out what you don't know right now. It won't cost you anything, and the upside is huge. That's our takeaway from this show. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over there, Drew, but in closing, I think those are 3 action items I would ask anybody listening to the show to take to heart and go do in their portfolio. Whether you're a property manager, an owner, a LP, a GP, a builder, an architect, whatever. Take those 3 and do it in your own world and see what happens. If you want conversation or help, reach out to me or Drew. We do a lot of these and they're all pro bono. We're not here to sell our time. If we end up engaging, that's different, but we want to change the industry.
Yeah. Well, and I think too that speaks to the confidence that we have because we see it over and over and over again about the power of what change we can make for you. Like we'll show you something that's going to be so powerful financially and operationally, no doubt.
Well, we always do this thing called the extra floor, and you get to introduce it. So we didn't do this the last couple of shows you and I did. I want to do an extra floor, but not all 3 questions. So we're just going to pick what is normally the second question. I'm going to let you go first. I'm going to ask you, what's one habit or practice that consistently makes you more effective?
I think there's a few of them, but the one that I think is so interesting is I like to go analog every once in a while, and I just did this earlier today, where everything is so at the end of your fingertips and on the screen, and you can do so much arranging everything as it goes, solving problems, blah blah blah. Sometimes though, and I do this regularly, I would say a few times a week, I just say nope. And I go to the printer and I pull out a blank piece of paper and I put it in front of me. And then I just grab my pencil and I start working what I was going to do digitally on the screen. And there's just something tactile, physical. Oh, I smudged my pencil as a left-hander. That's the lot that we suffer in life. There's something about that. Do I end up taking that and digitizing it? Yes. Could I have gone straight digital? Yes. But for me, I'm not saying this is true for everybody. There's some kind of reset that happens with that really resonates with me. And I didn't know that for a long, long time. So, but it's something I've realized probably in the last decade, let's say. So it's kind of maybe a little nook and cranny of one, I feel, but it's real. It's real. Yeah, exactly. You can't stay there, but it's good to just like pull back and prove that it still exists. How about yourself? What would you think of for one habit or practice that consistently makes you better?
The first 30 minutes I'm awake, I am analog. So we didn't plan this, folks, but I was going to talk about my first 30 minutes. I used to do a 10-10-10 where I would journal, meditate, and plan. And now I basically say the first 30 minutes of the day, I try to get some sunlight in my eyes, to get the circadian rhythm going. That's hard in the winter in Colorado because it's dark until 7:30 and I'm up long before that. But I do not look at a screen for at least the first 30 minutes. And sometimes it ends up being an hour and a half or 2 hours because I might roll right into the gym. I go to the gym every weekday and at least one on the weekend. And that's a 75-minute thing, right? So if the first 30 minutes, my brain is clear and I'm just thinking, no phone, like I can't look at it. Don't pick it up and answer right away because my day can just go sideways. Spend time talking to Julie over some coffee. I might sit outside if the weather's nice. Sometimes I'll go for a little walk just around the block or something. Maybe I'll do analog and plan. I call what MIT's most important tasks. What are the 3 I'm going to do today to move me or the business forward? And then before I know it, I may or may not be looking at the screen until 9 o'clock. and I've been up since at least 6. So and then I can dive right in. And I haven't been, at the end of the day, I've not been looking at a screen for 10 hours. So, cause I'm an early bird. So I didn't mean to make it go analog, but that first 30 minutes to me is super precious. I do the same meditation every morning. Some people call it prayer. Some people call it meditation. And after that goes sideways. And then I start thinking about or having a conversation with, you know, my higher power. I'm being neutral for the audience, but that ritual has been in place for at least a decade. And it was after some really low times in my life. And I found that and I've not let go of it. It's been great. We were trying to be vulnerable and there we go. There you go, folks. For all the guests on the show, you're going to get asked questions like this at the end. We call it the extra floor.
Yeah, it's fun though. I mean, is it
Yeah, good.
get
Lets
out
you
of the
get to know
business
the
world for a
guest
sec.
instead of just the business or the strategy. All right. Well, you started out by saying this. I'll finish. Please like, subscribe, follow, forward this to your friends, forward this to somebody that if it resonated with you, forward it. If you know somebody that should be on the show. Every episode has its own page on the Peak Property Performance website. The notes are there. If you want to listen to the show, you can. It's on all the major platforms. Just engage, make the conversation better because it's helping everybody. And to those who are engaged already, thank you. We appreciate you and look forward to the next episode.